The message came in at 11:52 on a Tuesday night, and I almost missed it because I had my phone on Do Not Disturb. I was in the middle of a deposition review in my hotel room in Phoenix. 3 folders open across the bed, a cold cup of room service coffee on the nightstand, and a highlighter cap I'd been chewing on for 20 minutes. I'm a paralegal specialist for a mid-sized litigation firm in Charlotte. My job is to find the thing that doesn't match. Inconsistencies in financial disclosures, gaps in timelines, a number that appears twice in slightly different forms. I have been doing this for 9 years and I am, according to my supervising attorney, unreasonably good at it. My brother sent the message. It was short. He said, "Hey, just so you know, we moved some stuff out of storage this week. You should check your account." I read it twice. Then I put down the highlighter and sat very still on the edge of the hotel bed for a moment. My brother and I are not close. We were, once, the way siblings are close, when they're the only 2 people who understand the specific texture of growing up in the same house with the same parents. But distance and money and the particular way he had of borrowing things without quite asking had built a gap between us over the years that we had both, I think, chosen not to look at directly. He was 31. He lived 40 minutes from my house in Charlotte, in an apartment our mother helped him with when he lost his job the year before. He had my ex-husband's number in his phone and had kept it after the divorce, which I noted at the time and filed away. My ex-husband's name is Curtis. We were married for 4 years. We divorced 18 months before the events I'm describing in what I thought was a relatively clean separation. We had split the joint accounts. I had kept the house. He had taken his car and a significant portion of what I had quietly thought of as my goodwill. The divorce was final in March. By May, he had moved to a new apartment across town, and by July, based on what mutual friends reported without being asked, he had started spending time with a woman who worked at his gym. I mention Curtis because he is relevant. I'll get to that. The storage unit was mine. I had rented it 3 years earlier when I was renovating the 2nd bedroom and needed somewhere to put the furniture I'd pulled out. 2 dressers, a cedar wardrobe my grandmother had left me, boxes of documents I hadn't gotten around to sorting, a small safe with the combination written on a piece of paper I kept in my desk drawer at home, which in retrospect was not my most careful decision. After the renovation, I kept paying the monthly fee because the furniture didn't fit back the way it had before, and I hadn't decided what to do with it yet. It was $62 a month, and I paid it automatically and mostly didn't think about it. My brother had a key. I had given it to him 2 years earlier when I was traveling for 6 weeks on a major case and needed someone to swap out some boxes. He was supposed to return it. I had a memory of asking and a memory of him saying yes and no, actual memory of the key changing hands. I didn't sleep much that night in Phoenix. Here's something I should tell you about myself before I go further. I am the person in my family who solves things. I am the one who filed the estate paperwork when our father died. I am the one who found our mother the specialist she needed when she was misdiagnosed 2 winters ago. I am the one who showed up and stayed and handled the thing that needed handling. And in my family, as in a lot of families, being that person comes with a specific tax that no one names out loud. The tax is this: people stop believing that your needs are as real as theirs because you have always managed. Being capable in certain family systems reads as being inexhaustible. I had been paying that tax my entire adult life. My brother knew that about me. So did Curtis, which is something I understood clearly only later. I flew home Thursday morning instead of Friday. I had a colleague cover the deposition summary. On the way from the airport, I stopped at my bank branch and spoke to a fraud specialist named Michael Torres, who pulled my records while I sat across from him with my laptop open and my hands folded in my lap. The storage unit connection to finances was indirect, but there was a direct issue 3 weeks earlier. 2 transfers had gone out from a savings account I used for long-term holding. Not my primary checking. A separate account I had set up after the divorce specifically to separate my assets, one that I had not given Curtis any access to, and that I had not mentioned to my brother. The amounts were not enormous individually. $1,100 on a Thursday, $1,800 the following Monday. They had gone to a payment processor I didn't recognize. Michael pulled up the access logs. The transfers had been initiated from a device I didn't own through a login that used my credentials. The password on that account was a variation of one I had used for years, one that Curtis had known. I had changed most of my passwords after the divorce but had missed this one. I had believed, I think, that the separation of the account was protection enough. It was not. I did not panic in Michael's office. I felt something cold move through me, and then I felt it settle, and then I began asking questions in the specific methodical way I ask questions when I am working. Michael flagged both transfers for fraud review. He froze the account pending investigation. He connected me to a senior contact in the bank's fraud and recovery unit, a woman named Priscilla Watts, who I would speak to 4 more times over the following weeks. From the bank, I drove directly home. I did not stop at the storage facility yet. I went home, I had changed out of my travel clothes, I made coffee, and I called my attorney. Her name is Josephine Allard, and she has been practicing family and civil law in Charlotte for 22 years. I had used her for the divorce. When I explained what I was dealing with, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Okay, let's think about this carefully before you do anything else." What I did not do was call my brother back. His message had said we. He had said we moved some stuff. He had not said who the we was. I had a clear theory, and I did not want to make a move before I understood the full shape of what had happened. I want to be precise about the timeline because precision matters here. The transfers from my account happened 3 and 5 weeks before I got my brother's message. The storage key had been in my brother's possession for 2 years. The safe in my storage unit contained, among other things, a printed copy of my account information from shortly after the divorce, when I had been keeping paper backups of everything because I didn't trust the transition period. That copy included the account number and the login credentials for the savings account. The password written there was the one that had been used to access the account from the unknown device. My brother had the key. My brother had apparently opened the safe. My brother had apparently shared what he found with someone who used it. I did not need a forensic accountant to see the shape of that, but I hired one anyway because in 9 years of litigation support I have learned that what you can see clearly and what you can prove clearly are 2 different things, and you need both. The forensic accountant's name was Dennis Park. He came recommended by Josephine. He was 54, methodical, and had the specific quality of being interested in financial irregularities, the way some people are interested in puzzles. He reviewed my records over 2 weeks and produced documentation tracing the transfers through the payment processor to an account registered to a business entity that, when you looked at it carefully, resolved to a name I recognized. The business was registered to Curtis's new girlfriend. Her name was on the filing paperwork and Curtis's address was on the secondary contact field. The account that received my money was in her name and had been opened 4 months after my divorce was finalized. I read Dennis's report at my kitchen table on a Sunday morning with a second cup of coffee. I read it the way I read everything I need to understand completely. Then I closed it, put it in a folder, and went for a walk around the block. The leaves were coming down. A neighbor was raking. Everything was unreasonably ordinary. When I got back, I called Josephine and told her what Dennis had found. She said, "I want you to sit on this for 72 hours before you respond to your brother." I sat on it. Here's what I did during those 72 hours. I went back through my records and documented every expense I had covered that touched my brother in any way over the past 4 years. The 2 months of rent I had paid when he lost his job. The car insurance I had quietly picked up for 8 months after that. The cash I had given him at Christmas and after our father's funeral. I built a spreadsheet. I am good at spreadsheets. It came to a number that was larger than I had expected, which is a thing that happens when you stop not looking at it. I also went through my email archive and found a chain from 2 months after my divorce in which Curtis had asked me, with elaborate casualness, whether I was keeping the savings account I had set up or rolling it into a new one. I had answered without much thought. I had said I was keeping it. I had not understood the question for what it was. I printed that email. I added it to the folder. I also updated the security on every financial account I held. New passwords, all different, none of them variations of anything I had used before. I set up 2-factor authentication on everything. I contacted the storage facility and had the lock on my unit changed, and I retrieved the safe and brought it home. I photographed every item in the unit with timestamps. I hired a locksmith to change the locks on my house. None of this was a trap. I want to be clear about that because my brother would later use that word and I find it worth addressing. I was not laying a trap. I was documenting what had already happened and protecting what remained. There is a difference between setting a trap and simply being the kind of person who keeps records. The responding came later and it came in a specific order. Josephine filed a civil complaint naming Curtis and the girlfriend as defendants in the unauthorized transfer. The bank's fraud unit, working from Dennis's documentation and the device access logs, made a separate referral to the Financial Crimes Division of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. A detective named Sergeant Faye Drummond was assigned. She was direct and efficient, and when I presented her with the folder she said, "This is organized," which I understood as professional approval. My brother I handled separately. I called him on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks after the text message. I had not responded to the original message in any way. When he answered, he sounded immediately careful, the way people sound when they have been waiting for a call and have prepared for it. I told him I had a question. I asked him directly whether he had opened my safe. There was a pause. Then he said he had been going through the unit helping a friend move some things and he might have accidentally left the safe open. I said, "Accidentally?" He said it wasn't a big deal, he hadn't taken anything. I said I knew he hadn't taken anything, that wasn't what I was asking about. I asked him whether he had shared what was in the safe with anyone. Another pause. Longer. He said, "Look, I didn't know what Curtis was gonna do with it. He just asked if there was paperwork in there and I said, yeah, and I didn't think it was a thing." I wrote that down on the notepad I had in front of me. Date, time, his exact words. I wrote it down while he was still talking. I said, "Okay," he said. "Look, it's not that much money, it's not like you can't cover it." I said, "I know." He said, "You're not going to make this into a whole thing, are you?" I said, "I'll talk to you later," and I ended the call. I added the notes to the folder. What followed was the part that is hard to describe if you haven't been through civil litigation. It is not dramatic. It is tedious and expensive and emotionally grinding in a way that doesn't make for a clean story. There were filings and responses and a counter-argument from Curtis's attorney claiming the transfers had been authorized under a verbal agreement from the time of our separation, which was not true and which Dennis's documentation made very difficult to sustain. There was a settlement conference. There was a number that got negotiated down and then back up and then settled. There was a separate resolution with the girlfriend who, it emerged, had known the money was not hers and had cooperated with the fraud unit in exchange for a reduced exposure, which meant she told them what Curtis had told her, which was that his ex-wife had money she hadn't disclosed in the divorce. He had believed I would not check. He had believed, I think, that I was too tired and too busy and too conflict-averse to chase it. He had known me for 6 years and had watched me absorb and manage and stay quiet, and he had drawn a conclusion from that. The conclusion was wrong. The recovery was not complete. These things never are. Between legal fees and the amount negotiated down in settlement and the intangible cost of 3 months of my life that went into this instead of into something else, I came out behind what I would have been if none of it had happened. That is the honest accounting, and I think it matters to say it plainly. Winning a civil case is not the same as being made whole. It is closer to being acknowledged, which is a different thing. Curtis had a finding against him in the civil case. The criminal referral is still, as of when I'm telling you this, working through the process. I have been told not to discuss the specifics of the criminal matter and I won't. I will say that it is ongoing and that Sergeant Drummond is thorough. My brother called me 4 times after I hung up on him that Wednesday. I did not answer. He sent 3 texts over the following week, each one a different version of the same argument. It wasn't his fault, he hadn't known. I was being extreme. I needed to understand that he was still family. I read them. I did not respond to any of them. I showed them to Josephine, who said they weren't legally useful but that I should keep them, so I did. My mother called me about 6 weeks after everything became known. I had not told her what was happening and she had heard it from my brother. Her version of what happened had some significant gaps in it, which I think is what happens when you hear a story from someone who needs it to reflect well on them. She wanted to know if there was a way to handle this without it getting worse. I thought about that word, worse, and what it meant to her and what it meant to me. I said, I don't know yet. She said. You know your brother didn't mean for any of this to happen, I said. He gave my ex-husband access to my financial information without telling me. Whether he meant for a specific outcome is a question I honestly can't answer for him. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You were always the practical one. I have thought about that sentence a lot since then. I've turned it over the way you turn over something small and dense that you know has weight you haven't accounted for yet. Being called practical, in my family, was always meant as a compliment. It meant you were reliable. It meant you could handle things. What I understand now that I did not fully understand before is that it also meant something else. It meant that your handling things was expected. That your capacity was a resource that belonged to the people around you. That asking you to absorb something was not the same as asking you to sacrifice something because you were practical, which meant you could afford it. I rebuilt the savings account over the following year. I changed some things about how I kept financial information and where I kept it. I am more careful now about what I give people access to, not because I believe everyone is dangerous, but because I had made the mistake of treating availability as the same thing as trust, and those are not the same thing. The second bedroom is an office now. I put in a proper desk and a bookshelf and a lamp that I spent too much money on because I wanted it to be right. I work there on weekend mornings when I have case material to review. It is quiet, and it is mine, and no one else has a key to this house except me. I want to say one thing directly before I finish because I think it is the only thing in this whole story that is actually worth saying. I have heard what happened to me described by my brother and by Curtis's attorney, and by my own mother in the careful way she talks around things, as something I brought on myself by being too private about my finances. Too closed off, too unwilling to ask for help. I want to name that framing for what it is. It is a way of relocating fault. It takes the question of who did what and turns it into a question of what I should have done differently, which is a much more comfortable question if you are the person who did something wrong, or if you love the person who did something wrong and need somewhere to put the discomfort of that. I kept my finances private because they were mine. I did not share my account information because it was not information that belonged to anyone else. None of that is what made this happen. What made this happen was a decision two people made to use what my brother gave them access to without asking whether I had authorized it. I was not too closed off. I was not too private. I was a woman with a savings account and an ex-husband who had decided it was close enough to his, and a brother who made it a little bit easier for that decision to have consequences. The practical one. Okay, I have been the practical one. I know what that costs, and I know what it's worth, and I know the difference between the two now in a way I did not fully know before. If you are in someone's life and they have started making you feel that protecting what is yours is a form of selfishness, I want you to consider the possibility that they need you to believe that. I want you to consider what they get from you believing it. I am telling you this because I spent a long time not considering it. Not because I was naive exactly, but because considering it meant admitting something uncomfortable about people I had loved and trusted, and that is a hard thing to do. It is easier to keep being practical. It is easier to absorb the next thing and manage the next thing and stay quiet about the cost. I know where that leads now. I chose something different. I've had a lot of time to think about what actually happened here. Not the legal part. I understand that clearly enough. I mean the part underneath it. The part about how this was able to happen at all. Curtis didn't take from me because he was particularly clever. He took from me because he had spent 6 years watching me absorb things quietly and concluded that I would keep doing it. My brother didn't hand over my information because he's a bad person at his core. He did it because he had spent his whole life watching me handle whatever came up, and somewhere in that watching he had decided that my resources, my time, my money, my capacity, were a kind of shared property, not his to own, but available. Like a road. You don't own the road, but you use it when you need to get somewhere. That is the thing I keep coming back to, not the betrayal exactly, but the assumption underneath it. The assumption that I could absorb this, that I would manage. That being capable meant being available endlessly without cost. I think about the years I spent being the one who showed up. Filing the paperwork when our father died, finding the right doctor for my mother, covering my brother's rent without making it a thing, because making it a thing felt unkind and I didn't want to be unkind. I built a reputation in my family for handling things, and I thought that reputation was neutral. I thought it just meant people trusted me. What I understand now is that it also meant people stopped accounting for what it cost me. When you never ask for anything back, people stop considering whether they're taking. It becomes invisible to them. The taking becomes just the way things are. Dennis found the trail because I kept records. Josephine knew what to file because I could explain exactly what happened and in what order. Sergeant Drummond closed her folder and said I had done half the work already. All of that is true, but here's what's also true. I kept records because 9 years of litigation support taught me that the person who documents is the person who can prove. I protected myself because I had the skills to protect myself. A lot of people don't. A lot of people are in the same situation without the specific professional background that made it navigable. And they absorb the loss and call it family and move on. That's what Curtis was counting on. That's what my brother was counting on without quite knowing he was counting on anything. I am not angry in the way I thought I would be, which surprises me a little. What I feel mostly is clear. Clear about what I will extend to people and what I won't. Clear about the difference between generosity and availability. Clear about the fact that protecting what you've built is not coldness. It is not selfishness. It is the basic practice of valuing your own work, which is something no one can do for you. The office I built in that second bedroom, the lamp I spent too much on, the desk where I sit on Sunday mornings and work through cases, that room means something specific to me now. It means that what I make is mine, not because I'm keeping score. Not because I don't believe in helping people, but because I'm a person, not a resource. And I spent a long time forgetting that. If you take one thing from this, let it be that your capacity is not a communal fund. Your savings, your time, your patience, your willingness to show up, those things have value, and value means they are not infinite and they are not free. The people who love you correctly will already know that. The ones who need you to forget it are telling you something important about what they actually see when they look at you. I see it clearly now. That's not nothing, that's everything actually.